Okay, here we are in week 6 of our term, and we have a couple of important things to talk about tonight. So I'm going to start with your discussion board this week. As always, you need to begin by reading the chapter that's assigned. That would be chapter 8, and watching the video. So I'm going to give you a few notes on that. But your discussion board prompt asks you to describe your planning process and include mention of all key players who have any influence over decisions, methods, considerations, and implementation of curriculum at your school site and in your classroom. You may not have any of that in place, but read the chapter and watch the video and see how that might apply to you. Reading some of your previous discussion boards, I know that some of you have been involved in this, either at your school site or at a district level. So this is what they want you to be thinking about this week, is how do you actually go about planning out curriculum. So you will use some pieces from chapter 8, and you need to do also some outside research. So you'll need to find an additional article or two on the topic of stakeholders. Stakeholders would include teachers, students, parents, administrators, and community members. And what role do they play, and how do they influence curriculum design and implementation? So you're going to look for an article of choice that is in some way related to this topic of stakeholders. And of course, in your discussion board, you're going to include that and your text in your in-text citations and your reference page at the end. By the way, those are getting to be really good and consistent. So I'm confident now that most of you have down that process of in-text citing and how to create a correct reference list. So in chapter 8, when you're thinking about this implementation as a change process, first yourself as you make changes in your own teaching, and then with this unit design. So I want you to be really cognizant. I've encouraged you to kind of change up what you've done in the past to make this unit fresh and new so that it follows the intentions of the authors and gives you a different way of looking at designing lessons and units of study. And then you're also going to be thinking about yourself as part of a learning community, and how do you relate to those stakeholders within your school community. So on page 244, there are 5 guidelines that I want you to read over and be familiar with that should be followed for a successful implementation of new curriculum. And then it goes on to talk about the stakeholders. Those are in particular addressed on pages 259 to 263. So be thinking about which stakeholders are applying to you. And as we think about our students, I want you to think about special ed students, GATE students, language learners, all of those different kinds of learners, as well as your other stakeholders. The video that you're asked to watch this week is very short, a little over 2 minutes. It's called Collaboration Days for Curriculum Design, and this was videoed at San Francisco Unified School District, where they selected a group of teachers to write their STEM curriculum. So it kind of gives you a little bit of insight into what curriculum designed by teachers for teachers might look like. Okay. I want to spend the rest of this time talking about your unit of design, because you're going to be working on stage 3 this week. I'm pretty happy with all the questions that you guys submitted, your essential questions. I think that they will work well for this unit design. The way the college asks you to complete this is to do stage 3 prior to stage 2. Stage 2 will be your last week's assignment. It's hard for me to do this process because in reality it's really designed for your assessments to be done prior. So as I read over these instructions to you, I want you to be cognizant of the fact that you should have some assessments in mind before you start stage 3, because stage 3 is what you're going to need to teach in order for those assessments to be successful for your students and for them to actually measure what you're teaching. And then those assessments need to answer your essential questions and your enduring understandings that you wrote in stage 1. So that's why we call it backwards design. I've got the template here. If I was really techie, I would have found a way to embed this better, but I'm not, and I haven't. So this template is under your announcements. I put it up last week. It says UBD template. They give you some options when you click on the assignment, but I really prefer for you to use this template that I've attached. It's one of the options, but one of the things I want to be really, really clear about is I don't want a separate template for each lesson. That's not really the way that this is designed. So I want one template that you fill in. It's a fillable template. It's a Word document. And you can add everything in there on one page. So please don't give me a different template for every lesson, because that gets really messy and crazy. All right, so it's the Word doc template. I have already put it on announcements for you. It's also attached to the directions. Please understand that this will not format if you do it as a Google Doc. It's got to be in a Word doc. All right, so what they're asking for is 5 complete lesson plans. You're submitting the actual unit plan, the lessons, and the materials. So the big thing that you need to understand is the essential questions that you wrote apply to all 5 lessons. You're going through, it could be more than 5, but they're asking you for 5. And a lesson doesn't necessarily mean a day. A lesson could be a week, it could be 2 or 3 days, but 5 lesson plans. And all of these lesson plans need to be teaching what your students are going to need to show you they've learned in the stage 2 assessment piece. So within each lesson, I want you to indicate where technology might be integrated, or where you might put in some differentiation. Both of those things can be indicated within the lesson plan. Please know that these can be bullets. They don't have to be full scripted out lesson plans. They can be bulleted. But what I do want you to make sure you do is not just give me a list of activities that students are going to do. I want to know, how are you teaching this? The lesson plan is about you as the teacher facilitator, as well as it is the activities for the students. So if you're using Thinking Maps, GLAD strategies, AVID strategies, whatever your district uses, put those into your lesson plan so I'll know how it is that you're teaching. If you're using PowerPoints, if you're having kids do note-taking, whatever it is that they are doing, I want you to indicate that in the lesson. So it's about what both you as the teacher and your students are doing. So not just a list of activities. And then within there, as I said, you can put in any technology that you might have your students doing as either part of the processing or part of the instruction. That technology can be on your part, on their part, or on both of your parts. Differentiation, extensions, adaptations, making sure that you have taken into consideration all the students that are in your class. How are you showing that your EL learners are going to be able to access your instruction and these lessons that you're delivering? Okay, you want this to be in as much detail as possible so that a sub could come in, read your plans, and deliver these lessons. So it's not an overview or just a description, but again, I would encourage you to use bullet points. I really like bullet points. I think it helps us to summarize and to clearly indicate what we want to be seen without going into a lot of text. Because if you're going to be sending me a narration of your lessons, I'm probably not going to get through all of that. Okay, then between each lesson, or at the end, wherever you want to put it, in this learning plan, I'm going to hold this up again. Stage 3, this is where I'm talking about. So you're going to start with lesson 1, and you're going to put in your lesson, and then underneath that, or within that, you can put the materials that you're going to be using. So make sure that you include any supplemental materials, activities, anything that is needed. Now, you might have some formative assessment going on during this time. This can be embedded within the unit, stage 3, or it could be part of stage 2 under other evidence. So I'm going to leave that up to you as to where you put that. It doesn't really matter, and it gets a little messy between stages 2 and 3. But I'll talk about stage 2 in just a moment. So you're not going to be going into great detail with that yet. Make sure that you look at the rubric, because that's the way that I have to score you. So make sure that you look at each section of the rubric. I've tried to hit those important points as I'm reading through here. At the end of all your lessons, this could even be on a separate page. In fact, I kind of prefer that it would be. You're asked to do a one-page plan to evaluate the effectiveness of the unit as a personal reflection, and should provide evidence on how backward design practices affect and inform unit design and assessment practices. So here, use credible literature to support your ideas. And you're going to, again, have to cite and put these on a reference page. So you could use the article that you used from the library. You could use any of the materials that we've been talking about. You could use the article from last week from McTighe, Grant and McTighe. Anything that you've used that applies to this design, you can put into your reference page. But make sure that you cite this. So it's going to be a short one-page reflection, and then a separate reference page. Lastly, it tells you in one of the bullet points on the directions that you will be submitting your assessment model as part of week 8. So you don't have to indicate all the assessment measures now within your lessons, but you'll go into more detail about those in week 8, assignment 8. So it would behoove you to think about what you want your performance task to be. You can put into stage 2 at any point in time any of your formative assessments. You can put in any kind of publisher, test, quizzes, things like that. But I want you to think about what your final performance task, your summative assessment, is going to be before you design these learning activities. You don't have to give it to me in great detail, but you really do need to know what that is going to be before you design your learning plan. Okay, I think that's about it for this week. Most of you have gotten all of your assignments in. I'm a little behind on grading discussion board, but I'll get to that. So again, let me know if you have any questions about this. Please be sure to use the template that I've indicated. It will be cleaner for you and easier for me. It'll give you a nice clean unit when you're done. So I will talk to all of you again next week. Have a great week.